Page 213, exercise 16.1. I didn't cover anything in Unit 15 that has to do with arranging and composing and all kinds of wonderful stuff it's beyond the scope of this channel. There are other YouTube channels that teach composing and arranging and that kind of stuff, so I would encourage you to go search them out and follow them on that kind of stuff if that's what you're interested in. For exercise 16.1, they're talking about contrapuntal playing, hand independence. Well, gotta have hand independence to play piano anyway, it's no big deal there. But the contrapuntal playing. I've mentioned earlier in other videos about a melody, bring out the melody, and maybe there's a counter melody that goes along with the melody. Well, here we have a situation where we have multiple melodies. I'm not talking melody, counter melody, I'm talking multiple melodies going on at the same time. And you bring them both out equally. If you look at the music there on page 213, in the right hand it starts out with this musical, we call it a motif. It's a line of music. It could be just a measure or two long, and it has sort of it's just a short little piece of a melody is all it is. That's okay. Well, look at the left hand. Similar? Yes, and they're both melody, and they both get treated the same. So when you're dealing with contrapuntal music, you learn to bring out the voices. Well, they're all the same. So, yeah, but you have to treat them and think of them as voices. Each one is their own unique, individual voice. And you can have 3 and 4, up to 8 voices or more. J.S. Bach went nuts with this stuff. I would encourage you to go through and play a number of his 2-part inventions and his 3-part inventions. This is from his 2-part inventions. It's just a short little piece, and it's got 2 melodies, one in each hand. Simple enough. When you get to the 3-part inventions, well, you have one in each hand, but now you got a 3rd melody that's more or less shared between the hands at one time or another, and it's doing, and then you can do the well-tempered clavier. The fugues in that, a lot of those are 4-part, and now you got 4 voices going, and it does develop finger independence. Now, when I studied Bach in college, I was not allowed to use the sustaining pedal on any of the keyboard music. Bach didn't write for piano. They weren't around. His sons, some of them did, because piano was just coming into being, but Bach himself, these things were written more for harpsichord or clavichord. No pedal. The hands did it all. And it's great because it teaches the hands and the fingers to do it, and it teaches the ears to listen to what the hands and the fingers are doing. So I would encourage you, when you play this kind of stuff, don't use the pedal, leave it out. Make the fingers do it. You'll hear a lot of people using pedal, even professionals. Glenn Gould used pedal. And it's just like, that's not what you'd do on a harpsichord. Now, I'm sure if pedal existed when Bach was around, he would have used it. But it wasn't. So these pieces originally were written without pedal, so play them without pedal. Well, when you're studying this kind of music, you learn it one hand at a time first. You get that, and leave out all ornaments. Ornaments are extra. You don't have to have ornaments at all. You don't. So here it's 1 and 2. Now, notice the beginning of this piece didn't start on beat 1. Beat 1 is a rest. It started a 16th note later. Well, if you look at the second measure, you have a D, and then you start the melody again. So it's like a break in the phrase. So I lift up and then down. I put a break between the first 2 notes in the second measure. So that starts like the first one started. Bach didn't put in articulation and tempo and phrasing and none of that stuff. It was up to the performer to know how to do it. Of course, they taught him back then how to do it, so he would just do it. And you could find a number of editions, editions of people who have studied Bach music a lot, and they will put in the phrasing according to how they think it should be done. If you compare the editions, they're not always the same. It's interesting sometimes. So it's really up to you, how are you going to interpret this? Which notes are legato, which notes are staccato, which notes are just disconnected? The phrasing, however it starts, that's how I would phrase it for this melody throughout the whole thing. So in the second measure, I lift up before I go on. So the first two measures. And again, throughout. And I learn it one hand at a time well. Rest, rest, rest. Etc. And then after you get that, you can think about putting the hands together very slowly at first. You gradually work it up. Etc. You keep going. You get the idea, and then you can gradually work it up. And then if you're comfortable with that, try putting in at least some of the ornaments. Like you have that mordant there in the second measure on the beat, and I would finger it just like they're fingering. I do most of my mordants that way, 1, 3, 2. So it's here, the second measure. Etc. And you do them all that way. Now on measure 6, they have that thing, that's a 4-note. It's not a mordant, it's a trill. But that little squiggly thing, that's actually a symbol for a trill, but when it looks like that, it can be a mordant, which is just 3 notes. A trill, a short trill, might be 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 notes. That would do it. Well, in this case, we can do a short trill because we're starting on the upper note, the C, and we're just playing a C, B, C, B here. But when I do short trills, I always use at least 3 fingers. So it's here. And I would do a 2, 1, 3, 2. Takes a little bit of time to get accustomed to that. Once you get it, it really helps. So here, off of the G, and then a C, B, C, B. And then I have a... But if you look at measure 10, because we're coming off a G, then we're not going to start on the upper note on the trill, because we'd have to play the G again. And so here we're just going to do the mordant. Here. Generally speaking, when you're coming down and you do a trill, if the note in front of the trill is the upper note of the trill, then you'll start on the main note of the trill, so you don't duplicate that note. Not always the case, but in many cases it is. And that's why in measure 2, it's a 3-note thing. Because I just played the G, I don't want to... And in measure 8, we just played the G, so the trill, or the mordant, will just start on the main note. Like so. Now, if you look at measure 20, on page 214, they have a mordant there, but here I kind of disagree with them. They're only giving a 3-note mordant, where you'd start on the E and you do the E, F, E. But the note before it was a G, not an F, so I don't see why you can't do a 4-note here, and then come on down. So I would recommend 4 notes for that mordant there. So that measure is here. Etc. I would do 4 notes there.